Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And, of course, I could not do it without the man himself, WWE Hall of Famer, Ted DiBiase. What's going on, Ted?
Hey, the $1 million man is feeling like $1 million. You just chew it and do it.
Man, shout out to our sponsor, Blue Chew, giving men everywhere the assistance they need in the bedroom where it counts the most. And brother, you and I are Blue Chew gives listeners a hot tag. You and I are doing a fun little hot tag this week, talking about 30 years ago in 1994, to see what you were up to during the new generation era in the WWF. Man, we've got a ton of notes here and some really interesting stuff to talk about, so I can't wait to get into it. But before we do, as usual, I want to remind our listeners to get over to YouTube. It's youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. Go and get subscribed. Folks, just yesterday, as this episode comes out, we released a new episode of the Hacksaw Hour, where Jim Duggan looks back to 1984 in Mid-South Wrestling, his feud with the Russians, and the very first coal miner's glove match in Watts' territory. It's a great episode. Jim and I go off on a lot of tangents, and I think you're going to have a blast checking that one out exclusively on our YouTube channel. Not to mention, Ted and I have YouTube exclusive clips that we release on that channel, and clips and highlights from this show as well. So if you're not subscribed, you're missing out on so much amazing content. Again, it's youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. Get subscribed today. Ted, I know you've known Jim Duggan for a very long time, and man, that guy's a hell of a storyteller, isn't he?
He's a great guy. You know, what a fine human being, and just a great guy. I mean, and, Jim, he played some football before he got into wrestling. And, like when he first started, he was a little rough around the edges, but he's come a long way. He's a great guy. Yeah.
And anytime I bring your name up on the podcast, and I think actually on this most recent podcast, he put you over again, where he was like, nobody taught me more in professional wrestling than Ted DiBiase did. Pretty high praise from a guy who in his own right is a Hall of Famer, man. Yeah. Your fingerprints are all over wrestling, aren't they?
Yeah. Well,
great legacy, and we're going to be talking about more of it this week, looking back to 94. Coming into April of 1994, The Observer is discussing the steroid trial, which is about to start. Ted, as I was reading through all of this information, I saw where this was reported, and it really stuck out as something I could ask you about. The most well-known, but not the only distributor to WWF wrestlers, and a few wrestlers from the other organizations as well during that time period, was Dr. George Zahorian, who was convicted on 8 counts of illegal steroid distribution and 4 more counts of other controlled substance distribution in 1991. Zahorian has spent most of the period since the trial in prison. Zahorian also supplied steroids to McMahon, so if nothing else, McMahon must have had knowledge of what Zahorian was doing as it pertains to his wrestlers, since he was purchasing them himself. Zahorian, in the mid-1980s, would, according to trial testimony, set up shop backstage at WWF house shows in Western Pennsylvania and routinely distribute various kinds of drugs, including steroids, to wrestlers. So holy smokes, man, this is a doctor that was backstage and I'm certain was around you a time or two, and now he's in prison. And it seems like the bottom is about to fall out for Vince McMahon, the WWF. So I wanted to ask you, allegedly, he's openly distributing drugs behind the scenes during this period. It's 30 years later, so I don't expect you to remember specific details, but do you recall seeing Dr. Zahorian behind the scenes?
Yeah, I saw him. But I personally, I didn't deal with him. I wasn't going to go there. And so, I don't believe he's ever sold anything to me. I mean, and I didn't do drugs. I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, and he was supplying steroids as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, Look at my body. Do I look like a muscled up geek? No, I never did. I was always in shape, and but I just, and again, I've never had huge arms or whatever. I had good shoulders and triceps and a pretty good chest. It was kind of like, I didn't want to look like a dang bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
That's not wrestling. Of course, I'm sure Vince would have liked it better if I had looked a little more like a bodybuilder, but I had no interest. I really had no interest in looking like that.
Yeah, and you didn't need to. Jake didn't need to. Jim Duggan, who we were just talking about, Jim was fit, but he wasn't. He didn't look like skin stretched over cinder blocks like some of these guys.
Right.
Like it's fine to not be this big muscled up kind of a freak, even though that's sort of the look that Vince McMahon was marketing at the time. Yeah. And man, do you recall seeing him selling stuff to people?
I know I can't ever say that I openly saw him. Most of it, it's not like it's not like he walked in the dressing room. He would show up. You'd see him there, and he would go do business with whoever. Whether it was under the bleachers or out back in the parking lot or whatever. I don't know, and I didn't care.
That's how you stay out of trouble, boys and girls. Stay the hell away from that scene.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, steroids in professional sports like baseball or football would clearly present an unfair advantage. But in wrestling, it is, it's performance based, predetermined, and everybody is well aware of that nowadays. So, in your opinion, Ted, if wrestlers want to use steroids, should they be allowed to enhance their body, speed up recovery, etc.?
What I would say is, if you're going to do it under a doctor's supervision. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things when I signed on with Vince, it's kind of like, again, I didn't have, I've always had, I tell everybody, even when I was working out and I always had buggy whip arms, man. I was like, I could never get the big guns. But again, I always would advise you to do it under his doctor's supervision. And that's what I did. I mean, Vince, when he signed me, he says, we're really looking forward to what we can do with you, Ted. He says, but I do want you, I want to see you in the gym. And I said, well, you will. And I did. And, I was always afraid of steroids. I again, at home, went to my doctor and talked about it, and it's kind of like, I'll be honest with you right now. I go to this, it's a place out in North Jackson, and it's called the Men's Clinic, and it's, all kinds of, and they go in there, they take your blood pressure, that they draw blood and see where you're at and all that stuff. And and they give me 4 syringes, okay. And each syringe has like a cc, I think it's 1 cc of testosterone in it. And so I take that 1 shot a week. But that's totally under a doctor's supervision. And it's not for bodybuilding. It's just like for male maintenance. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get your T levels where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Keep everything else level.
Shout out again to Blue Chew. So Ted, it makes me wonder. You said that Vince approached you, about hitting the gym a little bit more often. We can go on record right now. It's all these years later. Did Vince specifically tell you that maybe you should consider steroids?
Never. No.
So, I mean, at the time they would have it in court that it was like, McMahon is just peddling this to the wrestlers and he's in on it with Zahorian and it's this whole thing. And it doesn't sound like he was trying to cram it down anybody's throat.
I don't think so. No. I mean, and it's Zahorian. I'm sure. I mean, if the guy was there, I would guess that Vince would have to know that if somebody's hanging around with the wrestlers and selling stuff. So it's kind of like it's like maybe Vince intentionally looked the other way. I don't know. I mean, really don't know.
As you're saying that, it's reminding me that on our WrestleMania 5 episode, we talked about how Vince openly stated that professional wrestling is worked, fake, so that he could avoid having to pay for a ringside doctor in some of these venues that he was working at. So Vince was not especially fond of the idea of having a doctor in the building that he had to pay for the presence of. So like if Zahorian is there, I would guess that Vince McMahon wasn't looking to pay him. So it's not like he brought him in to be a medical advisor. So what was that guy doing there?
Yeah. No, I mean, he was probably, he had to be a contact for somebody. I mean, we did have a bunch of muscle heads in WWE back then. And, and they were getting their stuff from somebody. So it's like, if somebody would say, okay, well, you know what, there's a bunch of other guys that, that I'm wrestling with that would probably be interested in what you're selling. It could happen that way, to where the guy is, oh gosh, I'm going to go sell to a bunch of wrestlers, but I mean, Marcus, God's honest truth, I have no idea, because I stayed totally clear of that crap.
It's funny whenever we do these podcasts and I ask you about like something controversial or something awful that happened behind the scenes during the time, you were showing up. You were seriously the guy that just showed up at the building. You did your job and you got out. It wasn't you weren't playing the politics game or anything like that. And that's why having a long career in wrestling, a decades long career, it's difficult to do. If you look at most of the guys, most of them don't do it. You did, and I think a big part of that is that you knew when to keep your nose out of stuff like that.
Yep.
Well, the hits keep on coming for Vince during this time. Jesse Ventura will be awarded over $800,000 from Titan Sports for voice work on over 90 videotapes. Apparently, Ventura signed an agreement that he was not owed any royalties, but it was deemed in court that the agreement was signed fraudulently because Ventura was lied to about what he was entitled to. An $800,000 payoff, Ted. It's absolutely wild. And even for a man with Vince's wealth, it's a big hit, especially given all of the legal fees that he's dealing with at this time. Do you remember hearing about any of this with Jesse?
Wow. I'm going, really? I don't know. I may have heard something somewhere, but I never heard that.
Jesse, he was on WCW TV at the time, and right after this happened, I remember him filming. They did like an open of a show or something, and Shivani threw to Jesse. He was like, "Jesse, you're doing pretty well these days, aren't you?" And he was like, "I'm feeling like $1 million or close to it," or it was something to that effect. Man, he took Vince and WWF for a lot of money. And so the whole thing makes me wonder, Ted, were you getting royalty checks during this time for your past work with the company?
I'm not sure when the royalty checks started. To be honest with you, I continue to get royalties now. I get a royalty check once a quarter. But back then, here's the thing too, Marcus, is what you have to realize is wrestling had been. I tell Vince McMahon, it was a territorial thing, and basically you were at the mercy of the promoter. He liked you, good, and if you did well, good, and if you didn't like him, then give your notice and go somewhere else. And it was that, but there was, and if you were doing steroids or anything like, there weren't doctors, there weren't nothing like that. I mean, it's kind of like the old school wrestling was almost like carny, and somebody told me that, that's actually where professional wrestling started, was in a carnival.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway.
And by this point, Ted, you've seen it all as a wrestler. You're whatever, almost a 20-year veteran by this point. And, you've been around enough promoters to know that a lot of time they have a reputation for not always being super trustworthy. And now, this news is coming out about Vince intentionally, willfully screwing Jesse Ventura out of an awful lot of money, which Jesse was able to reclaim after taking him to court. So the whole thing makes me wonder, Vince is not always operating on the up and up, it would appear. Does it give you pause at all when it comes to your dealings with him? Did you trust Vince?
Well, not totally. I mean, it's kind of like, a promoter's promoter, and it's kind of like by this time, but by that time, we were signing contracts, and I would have somebody go over my contract to make sure there was nothing in there that was going to be a surprise. But by that time, Marcus, you're talking about 94. I'm not, that's when I stopped wrestling. So now I'm, I'm a manager. Okay.
Yes.
And so I'm still getting paid, but I'm not getting paid the big bucks for being in the ring. I'm still getting paid and paid pretty dang good, but this is more of a, I don't know how to put it.
You weren't trying to climb that mountain alongside all the other wrestlers, kind of scraping for your spot and being competitive. You had a sort of a set spot.
I had been to the top of the mountain.
Yes. So you weren't competing with anybody anymore. No. Is really what it boils down to. So it's a good spot for you to less money, yes, but a little bit more comfort for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't making the Hulk Hogan money, because he was the big shot, or Andre, but I was up there in the upper echelon of the guys getting paid.
Good spot to be in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a minute to discuss our fantastic sponsor that is changing the lives of men everywhere. Of course, we are talking about Blue Chew. Are you ready to perform with the confidence of the $1 million man in the bedroom? Are you ready to leave your partner feeling like $1 million? You're ready to get that thing so hard you could go hunting with it? If the answer to all those questions is yes, it's time for you to give Blue Chew a try. Blue Chew can help increase your performance and regain that old confidence where it counts the very most. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so that you can plan ahead or be ready when that opportunity springs up. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part of it, it's all done online. You can forget about those visits to the doctor's office, no more weird, awkward, uncomfortable conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy anymore. It comes right to you. Blue Chew's tablets are made right here in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. But you know the drill, guys. There's not going to be anything discreet about your package. Men everywhere have never been more excited to see their mail carrier arrive, because when your package arrives, your package arrives. Listen, I know what your next question is. Will it actually work? Why don't you try it for free and find out for yourself? Something free from the $1 million man? That's right. You can try it right now for free. All you have to do is pay $5 shipping. That's it. Place your order now and give your partner a very pleasant surprise. Women are attracted to confidence, and Blue Chew can help give you confidence where it counts. Don't wait any longer. Time to chew it and do it. Take advantage of our special deal. Again, you can try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code EGAP at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code EGAP, and receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information, and we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring Everybody's Got a Pod. Another personality I want to ask you about from this time is Lou Albano. He'll return to the company in 1994 to manage the Head Shrinkers, and the guy was just always electric every time a camera was pointed at him. You would have been around Captain Lou during your first run in the WWF in 79, and now here you are 15 years later, and you're both back with the company. What can you tell us about Captain Lou?
He was a nice guy. He was funny. Oh my gosh, he was so funny. I mean, he was. There's only one Captain Lou, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he was good at what he did. You know, I mean, he the managing role, he did it very well. And yeah, I have no ill will or anything bad to say about Captain Lou. He was good.
He certainly was, and he's a guy who himself kind of made his way not just as a wrestler, but he made his way into pop culture. Because he'd be part of some television series. He was in music videos with like Cyndi Lauper. So I mean, the guy he really carved out a huge niche for himself, not just in wrestling, but as a pop culture figure. Really cool. Anytime you get to see that you were on the same roster as
Captain. You know, he always had, didn't he? It was kind of like he had like rubber bands or something in his nose.
Yeah. And like, this is a dude who was born in whatever, like the 30s or 40s, and he's out there, with like earrings and stuff, just not what you would expect. Just, I mean, you want to talk about unique. It was Captain Lou.
Yeah, character for sure.
Well, let's get to what was going on with you during this time. You'll come back into a manager's role while still doing voiceover work for TV matches. And the first selection you make as part of your team that you're assembling is kind of an odd one. Let's have a look.
Volkoff is penniless. He's flat busted. He's broke. Therefore, he works for the $1 Million Man.
You know what? If ignorance is bliss, this is Mr. Happy. And they say money can't buy happiness, but I guess it can.
Volkoff not happy at all of being so-called owned by Ted DiBiase.
Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. You got a price, don't you, King?
You got the money, I'm yours.
Exactly.
A man of integrity.
Bill Fear has a price. I mean, he's working for me, and he doesn't even like me. You don't like me, do you, Volkoff?
I hate you.
A lot of folks hate their bosses.
No choice you hate my guts. I've been in it before. But you're broke and penniless. Therefore, Volkoff. Like right now. Remember who's paying the bills now. Therefore, you'll do whatever I say. Because I hold all the cards and I hold all the money. That's right.
I love it.
That's right. Well, what do you think of how he looks?
Volkoff has no choice, unfortunately.
You look like $1 million. He looks like 10 cents.
Well, I have solved that problem. You see, Volkoff, for you to associate with the likes of me, it's beneath my dignity to have you walking around looking like that. So if you're gonna work for me, first of all, that disgusting hat.
Well, go ahead. Hit it.
Disgusting hat is gotta go. I will. I've got a little heart, King. I went out and I purchased you. I had special made for you a new outfit. That's right. It's gonna come out of your pay, of course. First of all, the $1 Million Man is black and gold, so you got to get uniform, Volkoff. Put those on. Show those to everybody.
What is this?
Oh, that is great.
Black and gold
tights.
tights.
Those are beautiful.
Property of the $1 Million Man.
Can you read?
Read this.
Don't put it on.
Put them on.
Don't put them on, Nikolai.
What did you say?
Keep your integrity.
He needs money, Vince McMahon.
Who
Not that
pays
badly.
the bills?
Volkoff has to think about his family. He has to think about...
He's hesitating.
Oh, well, he's going to do it.
Family first. Seen it before.
That's right.
Yes, but look at this. DiBiase is humiliating Volkoff intentionally.
A little clumsy, but he's getting there.
Wait a minute. What's...
Well, they look good.
Now turn around. Let's see it. Come on, turn around.
Property of the $1 Million Man.
Insult the injury.
Property of the $1 Million Man.
Well, I'll tell you, never thought I'd feel bad for Nikolai, but you got me there.
Oh gosh,
Man, what do you think watching it back here 30 years later?
Well, that was the whole thing, man. The whole thing is that people were supposed to hate my guts, and they did. And I did a pretty good job making them hate me.
I mean, when you can
I even now, and it's a compliment now. I mean, people will come up, when I'm somewhere signing autographs, and they'll get an autograph, and they'll go, Mr. DiBiase, please don't be offended, but I hated your guts. And I just smile and go, thank you. You were supposed to. I said, if you had liked me, I'd be a little worried about you. Anyway.
So do you still kind of get a charge out of it nowadays whenever people tell you that, how much they hated you?
Oh, yeah. It's, but again, that's all it tells me is I did my job well.
That's it, man. So any recollection of why Nikolai would have been chosen for this role? Just for perspective, at this time, he's 46 going on 47, and his time with the company is actually going to end later this same year when he'll go into semi-retirement. So I don't know. It just looking at it, it just seems curious, the two of you.
Well, I think the whole thing with Nikolai was just for the purpose of what we did is humiliating.
To get heat on you.
Yeah, to get heat on me. Yeah, it's kind of like, you work for me, and, it's kind of like you would never see me have that conversation with Sid or some of the other guys that I ended up managing. But that was done with Nikolai totally for that purpose, to humiliate him, in the wrestling role.
So it's a weird question because it's not about Nikolai. It's about you and getting your character over as this evil manager. That being said, it doesn't do anything for Nikolai, who's a veteran in wrestling by this point and has been doing it for a long while. I mean, any reservations about the angle when it comes to kind of, sort of in an offhanded way, kind of burying Nikolai?
Not really. I mean, you got to understand Nikolai's position and where he was at that time, in the company. Nikolai's at the end of his run.
Mm-hmm.
And Nikolai had never been was he ever the main event?
If so, it was not for a sustained period of time.
Yeah.
So it's and he was doing business, and that's what you're supposed to do when you're coming toward the end of your career, right?
Well, and again, it's just like doing a job.
Mm-hmm.
You're there to do a job, but I mean, and this was all, I think, all understood. It wasn't like he was out there against his wishes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it wasn't like, okay, well, I have to do this, but this really sucks. No, I mean, he's playing a role. We were all playing a role.
That's it. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that and get swept away in the characters and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it's like if you're on a television show and somebody said, hey, you need to play this down on your luck guy, and this rich guy is going to take advantage of you, you'd be like, okay, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's the same thing.
Yep. Well, you and Nikolai would cross paths a lot over the course of your career. He's actually going to be there during that first run with the WWF, then in Mid-South, and of course, during your time in the 80s and early 90s with the WWF. Overall, Nikolai, and a lot of experiences around him, or anything you can tell us about him?
Not really. I mean, I always got along with him. He was a nice guy, very friendly, outgoing. It's kind of like, he wasn't one of the guys that just sat in the corner and with his head down. And no, I mean, nothing special, but yeah, I mean, we got along.
It's interesting seeing him painted in a sympathetic role here, because his character has been mainly established in the role of a foreign antagonist, somebody who hates America.
Yeah.
Do you think it's hard to reverse something like that and turn a guy like Nikolai babyface?
It can be done. I mean, you can turn anybody. It's just how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, but when you do, it's kind of like this. It's like, I was really over when I was a babyface. And the more over you are when you make the switch, because I was such an over babyface, like say for Bill Watson Mid-South.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was like one of his top guys. And so for me to turn heel and basically turn on the people, oh my gosh, that just accentuated my heat automatically.
Do you think the same is?
The more over you are when you make the turn, I mean, you're going to be even a hotter heel.
Do you think the same is true when it comes to heels? Like if the crowd hates you and wants to see you get your ass kicked every night, eventually they're going to love you?
Yeah, and if you do something and become a babyface, yeah, they're going to get the same thing. It works both ways.
Interesting, man. Even I wonder, so you and I have talked before about the difference between a tough guy heel and a chicken shit heel. Where the tough guy heel is eventually going to get over with the fans because he's showing that he's nobody to trifle with. A chicken shit heel might not get over with the fans because he's a coward and nobody wants to back a coward. Do you think that chicken shit heel is able to get over as a baby face down the road?
I mean, yeah, it's all how you do it.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, I mean, that's the deal. It's all how you do it. So, and again, I was the chicken shit heel. It was kind of like I talked real big, and then I'd beg off, and you never get tired of seeing that guy get his butt kicked.
Right.
But then when I turned, it was almost like now as a turn, it's kind of like now you're going from bad guy to good guy. So now, to become a good guy, you got to quit being a chicken shit.
Yep. And that's it. Maybe it's the showing of bravery for once, like another bigger, more intimidating heel is giving you a hard time, and you show that you're brave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I can see how it can come together. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about here was how it was fun seeing you and Lawler in the ring as heels together, because for two guys that never really worked together much, the two of you had a lot in common. You're both considered excellent workers, both great as antagonistic heels, and both really comfortable in the color commentary role. Lawler himself is 43 at this time, but he's still an active wrestler with the company, and he'll main event the upcoming pay-per-view that year, King of the Ring, working with Roddy Piper. What do you make of Jerry's work, his commentary abilities, and the whole presentation of the King?
No negatives there. I mean, Jerry was good. Yeah, he was good. He was good at everything he did, and more power to him.
Man, no real flaws in his game that we can see. And one of the things that is always said about Lawler, and something I've heard a few guys over the years say, is that he has the best working punch in the history of wrestling. Ted, would you agree?
Well, I don't know about that. That's I might have something to say about that.
You had a great one too. And what's really funny is I've talked to a lot of wrestlers about working punches over the years, not just on recording, but privately, just because it's interesting hearing everybody's take on the right way to do it. Yeah. But what's really funny about it is that invariably, most of them, if you ask them, hey, who had the best working punch of all time? Almost all of them have said, I do. Which is just, it's a fun wrestling thing. And I would encourage fans, when you go to a Comic-Con, just ask any wrestler, hey, who had the best working punch of all time? I'd be willing to bet that most of them are going to say, oh, it was me. I did. Well, you're not quite done collecting talent for your growing stable just yet. The WWF is creating vignettes featuring people on the street who have spotted The Undertaker, who has been gone from the company since the Royal Rumble when he ascended into heaven after getting beat up by a group of heels, in a segment that felt like a weird acid trip. You yourself have got some plans when it comes to the dead man. Let's have a look at 2 of the vignettes that you shot surrounding the whole thing.
Would a man of my resources be doing in a place like this? A cemetery. Well, if you think about it, the $1 Million Man has a lot in common with dead people. Dead presidents, that is. The way I see it, Paul Bearer can't find The Undertaker because he doesn't have the resources. However, I'm gonna find The Undertaker, and when I do, he'll be mine once again. Because dead or alive, everybody's got a price. for the $1 Million Man. Last week, you saw me, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, in a cemetery. This week, I'm in a funeral parlor. Do you know what it smells like in here? Phew. Money! Lots of money! And like I said last week, dead or alive, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. Even the Undertaker. So it should come as no surprise to all you stiffs that I've made contact with the Undertaker. And soon, very soon, he will be mine once again. That's right, he will become the property of the $1 Million Man. And when that happens, all the other superstars of the World Wrestling Federation will be resting in peace.
Man, I forgot about that interview. That was, yeah. Oh man. Wow.
You forgot about shooting in a graveyard and a funeral parlor.
Yeah, well.
It's 30 years ago, and holy smokes, you've done a lot of stuff along the way. But what really stuck out to me, Ted, is as a kid, when I'd watch this stuff, I'd be like, yeah, that DiBiase, he's a real bastard. But now as an adult watching it, it cracks me up because I'm like, here's this guy in a flashy suit, and you're in a funeral parlor, you're in a graveyard, and you're just laughing like a maniac with a big handful of cash on him. It's like, wait, this is some surreal, weird stuff. But man, I love it.
I don't really know if... No, I definitely was in the graveyard.
Yep.
But I'm not sure I was in a real funeral parlor when maybe they just got that casket and put us somewhere where we could get that interview.
I know that they had a number of caskets for the Undertaker, so in all likelihood, that was probably backstage somewhere.
Yeah, and of course, when I did introduce the Undertaker, it was the Faker Taker, right? That's
right, Brian Lee, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later this year when we cover SummerSlam 94, 30 years ago, where you have Faker versus Undertaker, which is just a great angle. I can't wait to talk to you about all that. But you're starting to get really heavily featured on TV, and like I said, on our SummerSlam episode, which we're going to do later this year, you're going to play a really big part in the main event storyline. And all that makes me wonder, when Vince brought you in, it was primarily for color commentary, and your only duty was to go to wherever, Titan Towers or the studio, and do your voiceover work, and that was it. And now slowly Vince is starting to say, like, well, Ted, I need you to come on TV, and yeah, can you make this town? Now all of a sudden, instead of going to one studio, you're going to multiple cities in order to film episodes. Did it bug you at all, or were you kind of all for it?
Well, no. I mean, again, if I'm going to a city, to do TV or something like that, okay, I get that. The thing that I did not want to do, that I was, in my opinion, through with, was the day-to-day, the every day on the road,
Yeah.
And when that finally happened, that happened when Sid came along, and basically, Vince's words to me were, I'm going to put you with this guy because I want you to help him keep both his oars in the water. so I kind of like, okay, like a babysitter.
Here's what's really interesting about, and I never really put these pieces together before, but what's really interesting about you getting paired with Sid and you getting essentially the responsibility of being put with Sid is that, so the reason that there were reservations surrounding Sid is because I think it was 1994, so a year prior, he had an altercation with Arn Anderson overseas. Yeah. And Arn Anderson is one of your proteges, a guy that credits you with helping him along in his career.
Yeah.
Sid had this altercation, and not only did it come to blows, but apparently his scissor was involved, and there was some stabbing that went on between these two guys in this altercation. And now this guy who attacked one of your good friends and proteges is now under your watch. So it's kind of a really weird, interesting position for you to be in. Apparently, the reason he was called Psycho Sid was that whenever Jim Cornette was asked about the possibility of bringing Sid in, he said, "Did you hear what he did to Arn Anderson? The guy's a psycho. We can't bring him in." So then he became Psycho Sid when he did come in. But yeah, I don't know. I never put those pieces together. Kind of a weird place for you to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And again, it was for me, it was strictly business. Because I had heard all of those things, and again, I knew how to separate business from my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is where Vince wants me right now with this guy, and I'll do whatever I can do because it's my job, but I don't have to. It's like I didn't like everybody I ever got in the ring with wrestle.
Right.
We weren't like bosom buddies.
But you did your job.
Exactly. And with Sid, that's what I did was my job. And, I never had any problems with him. I don't know. And I don't know. And again, I can't remember now. I know Arn and I eventually, talked about it. And I told Arn the same thing. I said, and I don't know what about whatever you guys fought about, but I didn't ever have any trouble with him. He didn't. But Vince seemed to think that he needed somebody to babysit him. I don't know.
And it's you treat people the way that they treat you, at least in my opinion. And if Sid was good to you, then you're good to Sid. And also, you weren't there for the incident. You don't know what happened or what was said between Arn and Sid. So there's no excusing taking a fight to that level. Normally, you just throw some hands and that's the end of it. But we don't know all the circumstances. So good for you for not holding it against Sid and actually trying to help him on the road.
Yeah.
Well, Ted, look, you don't have to give me any figures, but you're pulling double duty now. Instead of just doing this voiceover commentary that you were originally brought in to do, you're doing some managing. Albeit you're not on the road, dealing with the day-to-day house show loop. But you are going from, if I remember right, Ted, when you would do commentary, the voiceover commentary on matches, you would just go to Connecticut, right, and do your voiceover work.
Yeah, they would do the TVs, and I would fly up into LaGuardia and go to Stanford and go in the studio and do the voiceover.
Right. And so now they're saying hey, by the way, you're doing a great job on your commentary. We're glad to have you as part of that team. But we need you to do some stuff on TV with Nikolai. Oh, and we're going to bring in Brian Lee as the fake Undertaker soon. Going to need you to manage him. So all of a sudden, the point I'm driving toward is the original agreement is not shaping up the way that you were told it was going to. And so I'm just wondering, do you make more money?
Oh, yeah.
I would hope so.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I did introduce the Undertaker.
Yeah, and that is part of this angle is where you're saying he started out working for me and now he's going to come work for me again, and then it's the bait and switch because all of a sudden you've got a fake Undertaker.
Yeah,
a fun angle, and I cannot wait to talk about it. Yeah, Under Faker. We'll be talking about that here coming up soon. But yeah, it's in general though. You were good with it. A little extra money. You're having a good time being back on the road, and you get to kind of be one of the boys without having to deal with the day-to-day grind, right?
Yeah, and again when I left, and again when I left the WWE and when I crossed over, when the wrestling wars started and the guys were, going to work for the other company,
mm-hmm.
And again, another conversation. I should have just gone to Vince. I always felt like, this guy is putting me, I am not an active talent anymore, and he's done this with me, and he's done this with me. So he's found a place for me, commentary, okay, manager, whatever. And of course, I was grateful for that. But going back on the road was, that was a thing. you know, and I did have that conversation with Vince later. Going back on the road was danger for me, because going back on the road was, back to that lifestyle where it's the next show, the next town. And, I didn't, it's kind of like, if you want to avoid trouble, then, stay away.
Yep.
So I didn't want to go back to that. And I guess that was like kind of a fear I had. And ultimately everything worked out, but I just, the road's a dangerous place. The road is where all the hell broke loose, and and it's kind of like, and you got to look at it this way. If you're if you're traveling like we did, and you get and you go to some event, and there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of people and everything. The event's over, and you go back to an empty hotel room every night.
That's tough.
Yeah, I mean and especially when the good time is just downstairs in the lobby.
A lot of fans are going to hear this and say like, oh, well, these guys just couldn't control themselves. Picture being in like your 20s, maybe early 30s, something like that, and you're around a bunch of guys all the time, like your buddies. It's like college. It's essentially, It would be the same kind of setting where it's like just a bunch of guys out on the road. You're going to drink. You're probably going to experiment with drugs. Women are going to get involved. It's not an easy lifestyle to avoid. It's really not.
Yeah.
Well, Ted, you and I are having a blast here.
I'll be honest with you. Sometimes you can even go to your room. And I can remember one instance, just etched in my memory. There's a knock on my door, and when I opened my door, Marcus, there was a girl standing in front of my door at the hotel, and she had, she had her clothes in her hand. I mean, she was butt naked at the door. And I said, "What?" And I just slammed the door. I mean, it's like, that's, like,
man, imagine avoiding, like, restraining yourself, guys out there listening to this, like that would be really, really tough.
Well, yeah. And especially, I mean, and again, people have heard my story. It was an issue for me at one time.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big issue with me, and I didn't want to go there again. Melanie and I had weathered the storm, and by the grace of God, a woman who should have left me stayed and gave me another chance. And I said, I am not going to blow this, and so I shut the door in her face.
Well, okay, guys, that is going to wrap us up for this week. Next week, we're coming back with another episode of Ask Ted Anything. We love doing those. So look for the post on social media where you can drop your questions for Ted, or you can also send me questions directly on X because my DMs are open. You can find me there at Marcus P. D'Angelo. And look, speaking of social media, make sure to follow Ted at MDM Ted DiBiase on all platforms so you can keep up to date with the $1 Million Man and see what he's doing next and what appearances he's got coming up. All of the above. And Ted, man, love doing these. Another great episode is in the books with you, my friend.
Well, Marcus, thank you very much. And again, I thank the fans who are turning in and following us on the podcast. And I just want all of them to know I appreciate it. And as always, I cannot let you go without doing it properly. Just always remember.
Sure.
Very important thing. Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
See you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.